Assalamu alaikum, girls. The poem that we'd be doing today is The Sun Rising by John Dunn. Now, coming to the text of the poem, girls, before I tell you what exactly the poem is about, as you're aware of, John Donne is a very popular metaphysical poet. We've studied about him in great detail in the first semester, but this particular poem we're studying for the very first time. Coming to the text of the poem, here the poem initiates with the poet personifying the sun, as you're well aware of what personification is, when you give human traits to something that is not human or not living. So the poet addresses the sun as a busy old fool, and he says, "Busy old fool, unruly sun, why dost thou thus through windows and through curtains call on us?" So he's addressing the poet and he's saying, you're busy, you're old, and with the passage of time, you've become foolish and you have no sense of discipline. And that is why what you're doing is that you're shining through windows and curtains and calling on us without really a sense of purpose. Must to thy motions, lovers' seasons run, saucy, pedantic wretch, go shide, late school boys and sour prentices. So he then, of course, is almost rebuking the sun, scolding the sun, the poet, and he's saying that why should you bother the lovers? They are not sort of they're sort of busy with one another and they don't want anybody to bother them because they're not accustomed to the change of time or season. And then again, the poet addresses the sun as a saucy, pedantic wretch. That means somebody who is bothersome, somebody who acts like he's very sort of holy, but at the same time, he is miserable, he is dull, and he is boring. And he's saying that you miserable, dull son, go and bother late school boys, boys who are getting late for school, and sour prentices. Prentices means is a shorter form of apprentices, people who do skilled labor, who learn skilled labor. So he's saying, sour apprentices means unwilling workers, basically. So he's saying, go. He's addressing the sun, the poet is addressing the sun, and he's saying, don't bother schoolboys, don't bother us, but go and bother and wake up late schoolboys and unwilling workers, and go tell court huntsmen that the king will ride. And he's saying, all the list of reminders the poet is giving, that there's so many people who need to be called to work. So he's saying the duty of the sun is not to bother the poet and his beloved, but rather his duty is to wake up schoolboys, to wake up non-willing workers, to remind the huntsmen and the courtsmen that the king will be out riding in a while, and also office workers who need to be leaving for their office. And he's saying that why the poet and his beloved should not be bothered at all, because lovers are not accustomed to the changes of seasons nor climate, and they're not accustomed to the change of hours, days, and months, which are the mere rags of time. In other words, towards the end over here, what the poet is actually saying, that time, climate, etc., change of season, change of daytime is something that just does not bother the poet and his beloved. And therefore, it is primarily important for the sun to do duties that he's accustomed to, duties that are his good share of things to do, such as telling schoolboys to go to school, telling the kingsmen to go and see what the king is up to, and of course, telling unwilling workers that it's time to get to work. Like I've told you, this is, it starts off with a personification where the sun is referred to as unruly, busy, old fool, and the poet is already saying that please don't call on us. There are so many other important things for you to do. Like I've told you, the narrator begins with a list of other things that the son could be doing. He could remind oversleeping children that they're getting late for school. They could ask the noblemen, and other people to get to work. Then the last two lines where he refers to himself as us, the poet refers to himself as us, suggests that he is not alone and rather he is with his beloved, and therefore he wishes not to be disturbed. Coming to the next part of the poem, the poet says, "Thy being so reverend and strong, why shouldst thou think I could eclipse and cloud them with a wink?" So now again, he's addressing the sun. The poet is addressing the sun, and he says that your sun rays are so sort of holy and strong. That's what you think. They're so reverent and so strong. But you need to think that I can eclipse you with a wink. That is, if I close my eyes, I can sort of bring you away from my sight. But he says, I will not do that. The reason behind it is that if I close my eyes, I will end up losing the sight of my beloved also. And then towards the latter part of the stanza, he goes on to say that I challenge you, son, to go and see if the spices of India are lying where they're supposed to be lying, or they are with me. And then again, I also challenge you to go and see if all the kings are where they should be, or are they here with me. Now, what the last few lines of the poem are trying to tell us is that the poet is so complacent with his beloved that he believes that all the wealth, all the authority, and all the things that look good are actually with him at this point in time, with him in his room, because for him the whole world constitutes of his beloved. And so whether it is the spices of India or whether it is all the kings with all their wealth, he feels he is complacent with his beloved, and all these things are with him as opposed to them being physically present where they are supposed to. So then again, like I said, that the narrator wants to shut the sun out of existence. It is possible to simply close the eyes and clear the mind and forget that the day has even come. Unfortunately, now that the speaker sees the person that he's been with, he says, I'm not going to close my eyes, because that way I will also lose sight of my beloved. Of course, the rest of the verse questions the worth of leaving the room that the poet is with his beloved. And then, of course, the reference to the Indias of spice and wine goes on to refer to the fact that, you know, the spice of Eastern and Western Indies at the time seemed to suggest that everything will run exactly as it is supposed to, irrespective of what the sun is referring to. And it is actually meaningless for the sun to shine on the poet and his loved one, because things will happen the way they are. And the poet is just complacent with all the wealth that he has at this point in time, because for him, his whole world is in the company of his beloved. Coming to the third stanza, the poet says, she's all states and all princes I, nothing else is. Princes do but play us compared to this. All honors mimic, all wealth alchemy. And he's saying, for now again, the poet says that my beloved for me is all states put together, and all the wealth and princes put together. And he's saying all the princes that you see all around the world are actually trying to copy us. And all the honor of the world is a mere replica of the happiness that we have. And all the wealth is of no use. It is mere alchemy, it is mere experimentation, and it carries absolutely no importance whatsoever. And then again, the poet says that, son, no matter what you do, you will never be as happy as the two of us are, because in that's the world contracted thus, thine age asks ease, and since thy duties be to warm the world, that's done in warming us. And he's saying, Please go and do your duty in warming the world. You need not warm us because we are happy to be with one another. And then shine here on us, and thou art everywhere. This bed thy center is, these walls thy sphere. And he says, okay, now that you've actually thought of shining on us, you've done your job. Because in shining on us, you have shown on almost all the world, because this particular room where I am with my beloved is the whole world for me. In other words, in trying to challenge the sun, what the poet is trying to say is that the poet is complacent with his beloved to the extent where he believes that the whole world, along with its wealth and its honor, resides with him thereon in that particular room. So then again, this verse does much to emphasize the importance the narrator places on his loved or his beloved. She is everyone, she is everywhere, and for him, she is everything put together, whether it is honor or it is wealth. All this is meaningless for the poet. And returning to the personification of the sun, the narrator addresses once more, stating that its presence is not needed since its purpose is to warm the world, and he is already warm, so he needs not need the sun at all. The last bit of line of the poem, The Sun Rising, ends on a somewhat cryptic, ambiguous note, because the narrator's universe consists of two people and one room only. And he brings it forth in a rather different manner. And he says that the bed is the center of the universe and the walls of the room are its edge. And so when that room is warmed, the whole of the world is to them, and they have the world to themselves. Coming to the structure of the poem, it is a very sort of noticeably unusual poem, both in the form of its content and both in the terms of its structure. It does not rhyme, and it does not follow any particular pattern from the beginning to the end. The first four lines, if you're to look at it, follows an A-B-B-A pattern, but each line has a different syllable count. So when you're sort of reading the poem, there isn't really a set pattern to it. The result is a poem that does not flow especially well, but does probably convey the frustrated mindset of the narrator or the poet who wants to be simply with his beloved and does not want the sun shining on them. Thank you so much, girls, and I hope you understand this rather unusual and interesting poem by John Donne.